it is 11 a.m., so we'll get started, and then as more people join, they can just jump in right where we are. So happy Teacher Appreciation Week. We appreciate everything that you guys do for students. So really quick, I just wanted to go over a couple of Google Meet features. We're not going to go through all of these right now. If you're interested in kind of digging in more to the features that Google Meet has in our HyperDoc, there is a link in there for more tutorials on Google Meet and how to get more comfortable interacting in here. So I'm going to share my screen really quick over here. Right now, everybody is muted, but in the case that you don't know how to do that, you can hover down at the bottom or click to get this white bar to come up, and you can mute yourself by clicking on this microphone, and you can also turn off your camera by clicking on that little camera icon. And if you're using Google Meet in a classroom with your students, up at the top in the right-hand area, if you click on the people that are in your meeting, if you're the owner of the Google Meet, so if you started the meeting, you can click on a student or a participant and you can remove them from the meeting, or you can mute them if they're not already muted. You don't have the ability to unmute for privacy reasons. So let's get started. All right, so in the chat feature, you can put in your name, grade, or subject that you teach. And this week, we're going to give a teacher appreciation shout out. So you can put a message in there, a positive note to a teacher that you work with, a teacher who inspires you, or maybe a teacher that you've had in the past, or you can toot your own horn and say something positive about yourself. I think I struggle saying positive things about myself as a teacher, but I think as a profession, we need to get better at, saying the great things that we're doing in our classroom and advertising that. So I'll let you guys get started in the comment area on that. I'm Kacey O'Maley. I'm an STS at Upland Terrace Elementary with Ed Tech Department. And here's some contact information if you have any questions later on. Like was mentioned earlier, we have a live meeting archive. It's in a Google Doc that's a HyperDoc, which means there will be clickable links inside of that Google Doc that will lead you out to articles or tutorials or videos that people in our department might have recorded that can help you. And we'll have a summary of all of the conversation that happens today and the great ideas that you guys share out. So our goals for these tech meetings, if you're new this week, is this is just a place for us to connect and share our ideas and learn from each other. And our outline for today is a little bit different. We're going to add on an additional 15 minutes. We've gotten some feedback that we have so many great ideas being shared that we want to make sure we're not rushing through anything. So we're going to go for 45 minutes, but as always, feel free to leave it anytime that you need to once you have your fill of information. So we're going to hear from Jenny Peirce today, who's a team lead in the Ed Tech department. Leandra Bambrick, who is a second grade teacher at Academy Park.
I'm actually a sixth grade teacher at Academy Park, not second.
Awesome. Thank you for chiming in. And Sarah Wright, who is an STS at Calvin Smith and Westbrook. So our norms for today, this is a collaborative space. It's positive. We're going to be learning from each other. And our focus is on student choice. So last week, we discussed how we can increase student participation in distance learning. And we heard from Ali Chai and a couple of other, actually a bunch of teachers in this conversation. So this is an article written by Heather Walpert-Garin. And it just focuses on the research behind the importance of giving students choice in the classroom and how this increases student engagement. And an additional article that she wrote talks about 12 different ways that we can provide students with choice in the classroom. Now, we're not doing all of these things at the same time, but we can choose ones that sort of lend themselves to distance learning or ones that work better in a traditional classroom based off of what our students need. And the idea being that if we're purposeful in designing opportunities that give students choice, we can still retain some of the control that we need to have as a teacher, but still give students opportunities to choose how they're showing their knowledge, what types of questions they're answering, or what ways they're organizing their learning. And so there's a list there. I'm not going to read through all of that right now. You guys can see that and click to that article later if you're interested in reading more. Today, we're going to hear from 3 teachers who are using choice boards, or they're going to talk to us about choice boards and how using those can really hit a bunch of these ways to give students choice in the classroom. So Jenny is going to talk to us about using Google Docs for choice.
Okay, one easy way to create a choice board basically is through a Google Doc, and choice boards, basically you give a variety of tasks for students to do, or a variety of resources. So Kacey had the list of different ways we can provide choice for students, including the choice of resources they access, the choice of how they show their learning and what they do. So, and also having open-ended questions for and prompts for them to answer as they go through their assignment. So choice boards have been around for several years. They're a great way to empower students. And in the HyperDoc, there's a link to one I've created and used with during some of my trainings with teachers on empowering students, empowering learners. So you're welcome to look at that. So I think it's important for adults to have choice as well. But anyway, so Kacey Bell, who she has the Shake Up Learning blog, and she's big into Google. And using Google tools in really pedagogically sound ways and taking advantage of them to create dynamic learning opportunities. So she created the tic-tac-toe choice board, which Sarah's going to talk about a little bit more. But a teacher that Kacey Bell spoke with a couple weeks ago in her podcast had some examples, and these are secondary, and I might have Kacey click on the tic-tac-toe, the figurative language one, just so we can take a closer look at it. And I really liked these examples because they're both, so the district that this teacher was from required offline activities definitely, but also she wanted to incorporate online. So in this one, she had a general, just a general assignment, and then she had an online way for them to show their learning and an offline way for them to show their learning. So they had the choice in that as well. And in this one, it's called a tic-tac-toe choice, but with the tic-tac-toe, generally you're trying to make, to create a tic-tac-toe. And so the center one, the 5 is often required, and then they'll choose the other 2 on either side to create the tic-tac-toe. But in this one, each assignment is worth 20 points. And during the week, they have to complete 5 of them to equal 100. So they choose 5 of the 9 assignments to do. Another adaptation I've seen with this is that center choice is a big assignment, like a big project for the week worth 100 points. And then the 8 on the outside would be the smaller 20 point projects. That way, some students like to have, you know, one big project that they complete through the week, and some like to have it kind of broken down into smaller chunks that they do every day. So that provides even more choice. And the nice thing about this, especially for students who don't have the online access, is that, you know, with it being just a Google Doc, you can just print it out and send it home. So anyway, she had some great examples, and they're quite easy to create. And she just had them show their learning. If it was online, they submitted it through Wakelet or or an Adobe Spark page, all of their assignments. So it was all in one place. Or if they were doing it offline, it would be just they'd turn in their packet at the end of the week. So, and this was secondary, so it, you know, she didn't have to put in a lot of links and be really specific for what the kids needed to do, because her students had already used all of these tools. And that's a really important thing whenever with distance learning, is that we're focusing on using tools that our students already know. We don't, it's adding a whole other layer of complication when they're trying to learn new tools as well. So I think that's all I wanted to say about that.
Awesome, thanks, Jenny. All right, we're gonna move on to Leandra, and sorry that it says second grade. I need to fix that. You are a sixth grade teacher. So Leandra's going to talk to us about how she's using choice boards in sixth grade. So I just put up some questions. How are you providing opportunities for choice? How have your students responded to this? And do you have any helpful tips for our teachers who are interested in trying something like this in their classroom?
Yeah, so I actually use Google Slides for my choice boards because I have a lot more instructions for my students instead of just a quick little page where they have to zoom in, because my sixth graders, I've never taught them how to zoom in to see the bigger instructions. And so Google Slides was actually a lot easier for me instead of just, here, let me turn this on, instead of a quick little Google Doc. And I was able to put in little X marks for them too, so they could keep track of it. And that for me, I had actually created this awesome choice board. This one was for social distancing because my students were really curious about social distancing. And so Time for Kids had a free online magazine. But I was able to take that magazine, teach them about social distancing that they were obsessed with at the moment, and really hit my standards. So it was like, okay, well, you're obsessed with social distancing. Here's how we can hit our standards. And I have some kids who like to do Google Forms, and other kids who like to draw, and other kids who like to write. And so I just told them that by the end of the week, they had to pick 5. And that was it. I didn't expect a tic-tac-toe. They just had to pick 5 of their activities to show that whichever standard we were working on that week, I think that week was main idea. So they just were showing their main idea how they wanted to. And one of them was they got to create their own comic strip, which the comic strips were so much fun. Most kids picked that. Another one was like writing your own paragraph to explain the main idea and prove it to me. Another one was create a Flipgrid. So instead of having the kids type or write, they got to talk. So, but all of those count towards the main idea. So I thought that was really cool. And my students love these. So I've actually been using these digital choice boards all year with my kids. And so this was not new to them. They were just like, oh, okay, cool, a social distancing choice board, no big deal. So they love it. Because I really have kids who are all different types of learners. So I'm able to hit my kinesthetic learners, because when we were in class, some of them were like, oh, go to our STEM area, build this, and then show me. But now that we're not in class, it's, okay, well, now you can draw, or you can make that Flipgrid video for my kinesthetic learners and for my all those different types of learning. So they absolutely love it. And if you want to try this out, seriously, if you just go to Google Slides and you start linking the slides to each other, it's magic. Because all those little blue lines, they're just linked to another slide, which then gives the kids the instructions for the slide. And I had to learn how to link in Google Slides and I didn't know you could do that. And so it was the coolest thing when I learned that you could link slides to each other. And for anyone who wants to try this, I say just have fun exploring and use the tools that you already have at your disposal, like ReadWorks, like Time for Kids if you have it, like Nearpod. One of my previous ones actually had a lot of different Nearpods focused on different standards. So yeah, and if you have any questions, email me. If Kacey will put my email on, I'll put my email in the comments, and I would love if you guys email me any questions about this. And I can even send you the templates that I use. So I think choice boards are the best thing ever. So yeah, thanks guys.
Awesome. Thanks, Leandra. And actually, if you want to send, you could send me some of those templates. We can link them into that HyperDoc that we have for everybody. I like what you said about use what you have right now, like what your students already know, and we can start using choice boards really simply. And then as our students become more comfortable, we can add in other tech tools as we have time to train them. So we don't have to jump in all at once and have 5 different digital choices on there for them. It could just start by being 1 or 2. I like that idea. Before we move on, does anybody have any specific questions for Leandra, and actually for Jenny as well? I should have given you guys that opportunity. And if so, you can just unmute yourself. There's only about 27 of us in here, so I think we can kind of manage that if anybody has questions. All right. It doesn't look like that, so we're going to keep moving forward. So Sarah is going to talk to us about physically how we create these choice boards. She used Google Drawings for this template that she has for us, and it's sort of like a HyperDoc choice board. So Sarah.
So kind of how this came about, a teacher found this template. I think it was a Google Doc when she sent it to me and said, I want to be able to use this, but all of the activities that were on it were all basically just game websites or things like that, and wasn't really meaty instruction wise and good pedagogy. And so I sat down, and she really liked the idea of the tic-tac-toe, but wanted ideas for what tools she could use, how she could structure it to be able to make it easier for her to be able to adapt for whatever content it is that she's doing. So as part of our coaching cycle that she and I went through, we talked a lot about what kinds of things she wanted to be able to do with it. And then I went back to the drawing board and created this template for her to be able to use and change out her content based on whatever it was that they were learning that day. And so I just followed kind of the premise of HyperDocs with the explore, explain, apply. And so like Jenny was kind of pointing out, that number 5 is your must do. So any instruction that needs to happen, we put in there. And on this template, it also lists tools of ideas of tools that you could use for that. So I put things like Khan Academy or Newsela or whatever it is that you're doing that's basically your instruction, helping them learn that content. And then I just did coordinating colors, mostly because of the fact that I wanted to help structure it for our lower grade students to still be able to use, help make it a little easier so they knew I do the middle one and then I pick a color and I do whichever color boxes match that, so that then they could kind of get it. And I tried to structure it so that then you maybe only had one thing that was going to be a little more difficult versus another thing, trying to give them different ways that they were showing their understanding of the content with that. So like balancing playing a game, okay, but that may be a little more passive learning or showing your understanding. So now we're going to step that up, and your other thing to do is to teach it. so that we can make sure that you really understand that content. Hands-on versus writing, question writing. So I tried to balance it to make it fit. And like Leandra, I added the X's so that they could actually physically move it to help track what they had already finished and what they had already completed. And then also so that the teacher could see what it was that they were doing. Kacey, can I present for a second to show a couple of example ones that I've done with this,
Yeah.
with a couple of teachers?
I just stopped sharing. Go for it.
So this is one activity that I did with a third grade teacher that was for graphing. So as you can see, we did a must do with a video about graphing, and then we had them do their Go Math animated math model as part of this too, to help kind of structure, make sure that they had a good basis for it. And then we let them go from there. They had the Mega Math game from Go Math. So like Leandra, using the tools we already had, we added some of our Go Math. We have a quiz on quizzes for them to do, having them write a question for a Kahoot game that could be played later, making a graph using this chart, and then I linked it as well as had the image. I also linked all of the images as well, so that then they could just click on it to get to it, or click on the words that were linked as well. A formative, using Google Sheets to create their own bar graph and question for them to read. Explaining on GoSynth, and then teaching using Flipgrid and a whiteboard. And so that just gave a few different strategies. This one was a little bit different. We did it on equivalent fractions, also third grade class. And then just each one of these was a link to a different thing for them to do. So you could see it still is the exact same structure as the other one, but the activities were easy to swap out for whatever content it was that we were doing, with links and things like that for them to be able to do.
Awesome. What I really like about the HyperDoc template that the first one that we showed, is that this is a great resource for a teacher to look at, find something on here that they want to learn more about, and they can either dig into those ideas themselves. They could bring this to their STS or LMITs and say, hey, I want to build this choice board, but I need to learn more about Quizlet, or I need to dig in more to understand how to use GoFormative. And that's something that either like as a grade level team, you guys could do together, or you could reach out to a coach and work on that as well. So thank you for sharing, Sarah. I'm gonna present again. Awesome. Does anybody have any questions for Sarah about building this similar choice board to what she did, or any questions for her before we move on? Awesome. I like your comment, Crystal. I agree. We do love collaborating with our teachers. So reach out to us if you need anything. We're going to go into a couple of discussion questions. You can answer in the chat area, or feel free to unmute and share. Since there's a lower number of us today, we might be able to just answer verbally. So our first question is, what is one way that you can implement choice boards into your distance learning or traditional classrooms? I think we heard today from a few of the people who shared that that this is something that we can do with distance learning, but it's also, like Leandra said, she was already doing this in her classroom with her students, and it was working well. One idea that I have is maybe if I was teaching right now and I wasn't using choice boards yet, it might be just like before I dig into the content and the standards deeply with choice, it might be something like giving a choice board where students choose an option of what they're going to draw, or write a journal today and use that choice board of what subject they're going to write about. Courtney says using choice boards is great for assessments on big topics so that the students can show what they've learned in multiple ways, so we can give them choice in that modality for assessments. I like that a lot. All right, let's move on to question 2. So what is a new type of student choice that you want to incorporate into your classroom? One thing that I learned from Sarah, or actually it might have been Sarah, but also Jenny, was she was using choice boards for PD and trainings for teachers and adult learners. And I like that idea to also give our adult learners choice in what they're doing in PD or in trainings. Anybody have an answer, or I'll move on to the next one. Those questions were pretty similar, so I can move on to question 3. How providing choice might help us differentiate for our students. Jenny, you're awesome. Jenny says providing choice automatically provides opportunities for differentiation. One of my thoughts was that we can, like in those choice boards, we can give different types of scaffolds and let students choose. That might like differentiate, giving them more choice in what supports they want. Melanie says you can meet students at their level and watch their growth throughout the year. And Courtney shares the students can choose how they learn best. And it helps students play to their strengths, which ties into motivation and engagement. All right. Last question is, what digital tools do you use when providing students with choice? Are there certain digital tools that do a better job at this? We saw HyperDocs was an example, choice boards, sharing these out in Google Classroom. And then from there, if you guys have any lingering questions, we can have some Q&A time if you have any questions. Sarah, the thing I love most about doing the choice board with teachers was how easy it was to use tools that students already knew. And I agree, we haven't really talked about PBG, but I think you're right that when we're thinking about assessments and giving students choice and how they're showing their learning, that this can be a really good tool for us as we transition everything to standards-based teaching and learning. Kahoot, quizzes, Nearpod, Flipgrid, and GoSynth. Thank you, Keith. All right, so our last thing, we'll send out our feedback form. We actually still only went to 30 minutes today. I think there's just less of us today as we're getting closer to the end of the year. If you guys have any questions that are still lingering, feel free to unmute, but that is what we have for you today. All right. So thank you guys for joining us. If you have any other questions, feel free to unmute, but that is kind of us wrapping up this meeting. Thanks for coming. Thank you, Jenny. The link to the feedback form is in the chat. You're welcome, Courtney. Thanks for coming. Thanks, Linda.